The Middle Ages were a time of knights in shining armor, deadly plagues, and terrible kings and queens. But what was daily life really like for the average medieval peasant? Hi, and welcome to the Curious Past. Today we are knee-deep in the muck and mire of medieval times. Forget the kings and queens for a moment. Let's talk about the common people who lived during this era. When most people think about the Middle Ages, they picture men on horseback brandishing swords and shields, or perhaps some peasants toiling in a field. And while those images aren't completely off base, they don't paint a complete picture of what life was like in medieval Europe. We often imagine that because sanitation was poor, life expectancy short and medical knowledge limited, the people of the Middle Ages suffered constantly from disease and privation. While illness and death were more common than in modern times, the medieval peasant wasn't necessarily worse off than their modern counterpart. Medieval people lived shorter lives, on average, but that's not because they were constantly sick. They just didn't have access to modern medicine. Life-saving surgeries and treatments weren't available, so small injuries or illnesses could become fatal. The medieval peasant diet consisted of vegetables, fruit, eggs, cheese, and bread. While this may seem rather bland by modern standards, these foods provided the necessary sustenance to keep the average person healthy. Of course, there were times of plenty and times of famine. A late blight on potatoes could decimate a family farm, and starvation was always around the corner. But generally speaking, the medieval peasant ate well. There were even some luxuries available to the average person in the Middle Ages. Most towns had taverns, where peasants could go to drink beer and wine and enjoy the company of others. Beer was considered safer to drink than water, so it was enjoyed by all ages. The tavern was also a place to hear live music and maybe catch a juggler or acrobat performing. While the food wasn't amazing, it was available to all who could afford it. And the same went for clothing. Basic garments such as tunics and trousers were available for purchase in most towns, and were simple enough for the wearer to make repairs when needed. Plagues and diseases did strike during the Middle Ages, but life for the average person wasn't as horrible as you might think. While entire villages could be wiped out by diseases such as the bubonic plague, the survivors weren't left destitute. The Catholic Church took care of the sick and the poor, and there were laws in place to prevent landlords from evicting families who had been struck by plague. The peasants who survived the plague years were able to rebuild their lives, and the economy of Europe was able to recover. Work was readily available for those able to work during the Middle Ages. Landowners needed people to work their fields and staff to run their households. Peasants who worked the land were usually paid in food and a small amount of money. Those who worked in the household were given room and board, plus a small salary. The work was hard and the hours long, but the pay wasn't terrible, and if a worker felt they were being treated unjustly, they could simply find other employment. During the Middle Ages, serfs were tied to the land they worked. This means they couldn't leave without permission of their lord. However, there were many jobs available in a medieval town that didn't require permission. Many different trades were common during the Middle Ages, such as blacksmithing, carpentry, weaving, and pottery. These trades were usually passed down from father to son, but there were instances where women were able to make a name for themselves, despite societal expectations. While the life of a medieval peasant wasn't easy, it certainly wasn't horrible. Sure, there were hardships and tragedies, but there were also good times to be had. The people of the Middle Ages lived, worked, and played. They farmed the land, drank in the tavern, and made enough money to clothe themselves and their children. So while it might not have been the best time to be alive, it certainly wasn't the worst. So what do you think? How would you have fared as a medieval peasant? Let me know your thoughts below. And remember to stay tuned for more information about life in the Middle Ages.